Clint Eastwood woke up early that morning as the sun rose over the hills of Carmel. The famous actor and director was now 94 years old, but he still kept to his routine. He made his coffee and walked out to his wide porch. From there, he could see the ocean in the distance. The cool morning air felt good on his face. Eastwood had lived in this small California town for over 50 years. He even served as the town's mayor back in the 1980s. The people here respected him and gave him the privacy he valued. Most days were quiet and peaceful. This day would be different. As Eastwood sat in his favorite chair, his housekeeper, Maria, brought him the mail. "Good morning, Mr. Eastwood," she said with a smile. "Your mail came early today." Eastwood nodded his thanks and started to look through the envelopes. Bills, invitations, fan letters, the usual mix. Then he saw the official-looking envelope with the court seal. His eyes narrowed as he opened it. "What now?" he muttered to himself as he read the paper inside. It was a court summons. According to the document, Eastwood was being sued by Pacific Coast Development, a big company that built luxury homes and resorts. They claimed that Eastwood had blocked their legal right to build on land near his property, land that would give the public access to a beautiful beach. Eastwood put the paper down and looked out at the hills. He knew exactly what land they meant. It was a stretch of coastline where rare birds nested and where wildflowers grew that couldn't be found anywhere else. He had been fighting to protect that land for years. He picked up his phone and called his lawyer, Michael Chen. Chen had worked with Eastwood for over 20 years and understood how much the actor cared about Carmel and its natural beauty. "Mike, it's Clint. Pacific Coast Development is taking me to court about the beach access. I just got the summons." "I was afraid this might happen," Chen said with a sigh. "They've been pushing hard for that permit. When did they schedule the hearing?" 4 weeks from now, July 9th. "That doesn't give us much time, but we can be ready. I'll come by tomorrow morning to start preparing our case." Eastwood thanked him and hung up. He walked to his study and pulled out a large folder labeled Carmel Point Conservation. Inside were maps, photos, and reports he had collected over the years. Eastwood may have been famous for playing tough guys in movies, but in real life, his passion was protecting the natural world around his beloved town. The next few weeks were busy. Eastwood met with his lawyer almost every day. They talked to scientists who studied the rare birds and plants in the area. They worked with map experts to show how the developers' plans would damage the delicate sand dunes. Eastwood even paid for new studies to show how the coast was changing due to rising sea levels. "We need to be ready for anything," Eastwood told Chen. "Pacific Coast Development has a lot of money and fancy lawyers. They'll try to make me look like a rich old man who wants to keep the beach all to himself." Chen nodded. "That's exactly what they'll do. Marcus Weller is their lead attorney. He's young, smart, and likes to get attention. He'll try to make this about you rather than about protecting the environment." "Let him try," Eastwood said, his voice firm. "I've faced tougher opponents than some lawyer with a fancy suit." As the court date got closer, news of the case spread through Carmel. Most locals supported Eastwood. They knew how much he had done to protect their town's natural beauty. But the developers had supporters too. They talked about new jobs and more tourists. The night before the trial, Eastwood couldn't sleep. He walked outside under the stars and listened to the distant sound of waves. He thought about all the years he had spent in this place, how it had become more of a home to him than Hollywood ever was. "I won't let them ruin it," he promised the night sky. On the morning of the trial, Eastwood dressed carefully in a simple dark blue suit. He ate a light breakfast and drove himself to the Monterey County Courthouse. Outside, a small crowd had gathered. Some held signs supporting him, while others supported the developers. Reporters called his name and took pictures. Eastwood walked past them all with his head high. His face showed no emotion, but inside he felt determined. This wasn't like making a movie or winning an award. This was about something that really mattered. The courtroom was large and filled with light from tall windows. Eastwood sat at a table with Chen and 2 other lawyers from his team. Across the room, Marcus Weller sat with his team and 2 executives from Pacific Coast Development. Weller was in his late 30s with perfect hair and a confident smile. He looked at Eastwood with a mix of excitement and disrespect, like a young gunfighter eager to take down a legend. The judge entered, and everyone stood. Judge Susan Martinez had been on the bench for over 20 years. She was known for being fair but strict. She looked around the room, her eyes stopping briefly on Eastwood. "Be seated," she said. "Case number 2025 CV 4872, Pacific Coast Development versus Clint Eastwood Jr. This is a dispute over land use and coastal access rights." She turned to Weller. "The plaintiff may make their opening statement." Weller stood and buttoned his expensive suit jacket. He smiled at the judge and then turned to look at the people watching in the courtroom. "Your Honor, this case is simple. It's about a public beach that belongs to everyone being blocked by one man who thinks his fame and fortune put him above the law." Eastwood's face remained calm, but his eyes narrowed slightly. He had expected this attack, but hearing it still made his jaw tighten. Weller continued, his voice growing louder. "Pacific Coast Development has legal permits to build a small, environmentally friendly path to give people access to Carmel Point Beach. This beach is public land. It belongs to the people of California, not to Mr. Eastwood." He walked closer to the judge's bench. "Mr. Eastwood has used his money and influence to block this project for years. He has filed complaints, hired scientists to write biased reports, and spread false information about environmental damage." Weller turned and pointed directly at Eastwood. "The real damage here is to the public good. Mr. Eastwood may have played heroes in his movies, but in real life he's just another wealthy landowner trying to keep a beautiful beach all to himself." People in the courtroom began to whisper. Judge Martinez hit her gavel. "Order," she said firmly. "Mr. Weller, please keep your statements professional and avoid personal attacks." "Of course, Your Honor," Weller said with a small bow. "I'm simply pointing out the facts of this case." As Weller continued his statement, Eastwood sat very still. His weathered face showed little emotion, but those who knew him well could see the determination in his eyes. He had faced many challenges in his long life, but this one felt personal. This wasn't about him or his property. It was about protecting something precious that couldn't protect itself. The morning sun moved slowly across the courtroom floor as Weller spoke. Eastwood waited patiently for his turn to tell his side of the story. The real battle was just beginning. When Marcus Weller finished his opening statement, the courtroom was quiet. He had painted Clint Eastwood as a selfish rich man who cared more about his own privacy than the public good. Weller sat down with a satisfied smile and whispered something to one of the Pacific Coast Development executives. The man nodded and patted Weller on the shoulder. Judge Martinez turned to Eastwood's table. "The defense may now present their opening statement." Michael Chen stood up. Unlike Weller, Chen was calm and straightforward. He didn't try to play to the audience in the courtroom. "Your Honor, my client has lived in Carmel for over 50 years. During that time, he has done more to protect public lands than almost anyone else in this community. This case isn't about keeping people away from the beach. It's about protecting a fragile ecosystem that would be destroyed by the kind of development Pacific Coast wants to build." Chen picked up a folder. "We have reports from 5 independent environmental scientists who all agree that the developer's plan would cause serious damage to the habitat of endangered birds and plants. My client has never opposed beach access. He simply wants that access to be created in a responsible way that doesn't harm the natural environment." As Chen spoke, Eastwood watched the faces of people in the courtroom. Some nodded in agreement. Others looked skeptical. The judge listened carefully, taking notes. After both opening statements, Judge Martinez called a short break. Eastwood stepped outside the courtroom with Chen. "You're doing fine," Chen said quietly. "Weller is all flash and no substance. The judge will see through that." Eastwood nodded. "I hope so. But he's good at what he does. He knows how to make me look bad." When court resumed, Pacific Coast Development called their first witness, a land use expert named Dr. Robert Harris. Harris showed maps and plans for the beach access path they wanted to build. "As you can see," Harris explained, pointing to a large display board, Our design is minimal and eco-friendly. It would allow public access while having almost no impact on the surrounding area. Weller smiled at the judge. And has Mr. Eastwood proposed any alternative access points? No, Harris said. He has only filed objections and delays. He has never offered any constructive solutions. This wasn't true, and Eastwood leaned over to whisper to Chen. Chen nodded and made a note. When it was Chen's turn to question Harris, he was direct. Dr. Harris, did you personally evaluate the nesting sites of the western snowy plover in this area? Harris looked uncomfortable. Well, no. That wasn't part of my assignment. Did you consider the impact of increased foot traffic on the monarch butterfly population that winters in this exact location? I'm not a butterfly expert, Harris admitted. Just one more question, Chen said. Are you aware that Mr. Eastwood has, in fact, proposed an alternative access path that would avoid these sensitive areas? Harris glanced at Weller, who looked surprised. No, I wasn't told about that. The morning continued with more witnesses from Pacific Coast Development. Each one talked about how reasonable their plan was and how unreasonable Eastwood was being. By lunchtime, Eastwood could feel the case shifting against him. The developers' team was well prepared and made convincing arguments. During the lunch break, Eastwood and Chen sat at a small cafe near the courthouse. Eastwood was quiet as he ate his sandwich. They're making me look like the bad guy, he finally said. Chen nodded. That's their strategy. But this afternoon is our turn. We'll show the judge what's really at stake here. After lunch, the atmosphere in the courtroom felt different. The morning excitement had faded, and now people were settling in for the serious business of the trial. Judge Martinez called the court to order, and Weller stood up. Your Honor, we'd like to call Mr. Clint Eastwood to the stand. A murmur went through the courtroom. Chen looked concerned, but Eastwood nodded slightly. He had expected this. Eastwood walked slowly to the witness stand. At 94, he moved carefully but with dignity. He took the oath and sat down, his face calm and composed. Weller approached with a friendly smile that didn't reach his eyes. Mr. Eastwood, it's an honor to meet you. I've been a fan of your films for many years. Eastwood simply nodded. He knew what was coming. Mr. Eastwood, you purchased your property in Carmel in 1972, is that correct? Yes. And since then you've purchased additional land surrounding your original property? Some, yes. Weller picked up a document. According to county records, you now own over 300 acres in one of California's most beautiful coastal areas. Is that right? I don't know the exact number, Eastwood said, but I've put most of that land into conservation trusts so it can never be developed. Weller ignored this last comment. And you served as mayor of Carmel from 1986 to 1988? That's right. So you've had significant influence in local politics and land use decisions for decades. Eastwood's eyes narrowed slightly. I've been involved as a citizen who cares about his community. Weller's friendly manner suddenly changed. His voice grew harder. Mr. Eastwood, isn't it true that you've used your wealth and fame to block multiple development projects that would have benefited the local economy? Objection, Chen called out. Argumentative. Sustained, Judge Martinez said. Weller tried a different approach. Mr. Eastwood, do you believe the beach belongs to everyone? Yes, I do, Eastwood replied. Then why have you fought so hard to prevent people from accessing it? Eastwood leaned forward slightly. I've never tried to keep people from the beach. I've only opposed plans that would damage the natural environment around it. Weller walked to his table and picked up a stack of papers. Your Honor, I'd like to enter into evidence Exhibit 27, which shows all the formal objections Mr. Eastwood has filed against public access projects over the past 15 years. The judge nodded, and Weller handed the papers to Eastwood. Mr. Eastwood, in the past 15 years, you've filed 28 formal objections to various public access proposals. That seems like a lot for someone who claims not to oppose beach access. Eastwood looked at the papers. Each of these proposals had serious environmental problems. I didn't oppose the access, I opposed the damage they would cause. Weller laughed slightly. That's convenient, isn't it? You get to appear pro-environment while keeping people away from your private paradise. Objection. Chen stood up, his face angry. Counsel is badgering the witness. Sustained, Judge Martinez said firmly. Mr. Weller, please maintain a professional tone. Weller nodded, but his eyes were cold. Mr. Eastwood, at your age, wouldn't it be easier to simply allow this project to move forward? After all, you won't be around forever to enjoy your exclusive view. A shocked murmur went through the courtroom. Even the Pacific Coast executives looked uncomfortable with this low blow. Objection, Chen nearly shouted. Judge Martinez's face darkened with anger. Mr. Weller, that comment is completely inappropriate and disrespectful. It will be stricken from the record. She looked at Eastwood. You don't need to answer that question, Mr. Eastwood. But Eastwood leaned toward the microphone. His voice was quiet but clear. I'd like to respond, Your Honor. The judge looked surprised but nodded. You may. Eastwood looked directly at Weller. The famous Eastwood squint that had intimidated countless movie villains was now focused on the young lawyer. You're right about one thing, Mr. Weller. I won't be around forever. That's exactly why I care so much about protecting this land. What we do now will affect this coast long after I'm gone. This isn't about me or my view. It's about making sure there's something left for future generations to enjoy. The courtroom was completely silent. Even Weller seemed at a loss for words. Judge Martinez checked her watch. We'll adjourn for today and resume tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. She looked at Weller. Counsel, I'd like to see you in my chambers immediately. As people began to leave the courtroom, many looked at Eastwood with new respect. His simple, honest answer had cut through Weller's insult and reminded everyone what was really at stake. Outside the courthouse, reporters crowded around Eastwood, asking for comments about the day's events. No comment, Chen said, trying to guide Eastwood through the crowd. But Eastwood stopped and faced the cameras. With his characteristic quiet strength, he said, Some things are worth fighting for no matter how old you are. Then he walked to his car, ready to prepare for the next day's battle. The next morning, Clint Eastwood arrived early at the courthouse. He had slept little the night before. The insult in court had bothered him less than the thought of losing the case. If Pacific Coast Development won, the damage to the coastal land would be permanent. Michael Chen met him at the courthouse steps. How are you feeling today? Chen asked. Ready, Eastwood said simply. His face looked tired but determined. Inside, the courtroom was even more crowded than the day before. News of Weller's insult and Eastwood's response had spread. People wanted to see what would happen next. Judge Martinez entered, and everyone stood. She looked stern as she took her seat. Before we continue, I want to make something clear. Yesterday, there were comments made that were disrespectful and inappropriate. This will not happen again in my courtroom. We are here to discuss facts and law, not to make personal attacks. She looked directly at Marcus Weller. Is that understood? Yes, Your Honor, Weller said. He looked less confident than the day before. Rumors in the courthouse said Judge Martinez had given him a severe warning in her chambers. Good, the judge said. Defense, you may call your first witness. Chen stood up. The defense calls Dr. Emily Sandoval. A woman in her 50s walked to the witness stand. She had a serious face and simple clothes. After she was sworn in, Chen began his questions. Dr. Sandoval, please tell the court about your background. I have a PhD in environmental science from UC Berkeley. For the past 20 years, I've specialized in coastal ecosystem conservation. I currently work for the California Coastal Commission. Chen nodded. Have you studied the specific area of coastline involved in this case? Yes, Dr. Sandoval said. I've been monitoring the western snowy plover population there for 15 years. It's one of the few remaining nesting areas for this endangered bird. Chen showed the court large photographs of small birds on the sand. And would the development proposed by Pacific Coast affect these birds? Absolutely, Dr. Sandoval said firmly. The planned path goes directly through their primary nesting area. The increased human traffic would likely cause them to abandon the site completely, Chen continued. What about other wildlife in the area? For the next 30 minutes, Dr. Sandoval explained the complex ecosystem of the coastal area. She talked about rare plants, butterflies, and the delicate balance that kept everything alive. The courtroom was silent as she spoke. Even people who had supported the development seemed affected by her description of what would be lost. When it was Weller's turn to question Dr. Sandoval, he tried to undermine her testimony. Dr. Sandoval, isn't it true that birds can simply nest somewhere else if disturbed? Dr. Sandoval shook her head. The western snowy plover requires very specific conditions for nesting. There are very few suitable locations left on the California coast, and most of those are already threatened by development. Weller tried several more questions, but Dr. Sandoval remained calm and confident. Her knowledge was too deep for him to challenge effectively. After Dr. Sandoval, Chen called a local fisherman who had worked the waters off Carmel Point for 40 years. The old man described how development along other parts of the coast had changed the fishing grounds. When you mess with the land, you mess with the sea too, he said simply. Next came a botanist who specialized in rare coastal plants. She showed the court beautiful photographs of flowers that grew only in this small area. Once these are gone, they're gone forever, she explained. As each witness spoke, Eastwood watched the faces of the jury and the judge. He could see that the scientific evidence was strong. But would it be enough? Pacific Coast Development had powerful friends and a lot of money behind them. During the lunch break, Chen seemed happy with how the morning had gone. Our witnesses did well, he said. The science is on our side. Eastwood nodded. Weller doesn't care about science. He cares about winning. He'll have something planned for this afternoon. Eastwood was right. When court resumed, Weller called a surprise witness, Sarah Martinez, a young woman who had grown up in Carmel. Ms. Martinez, can you tell the court about your experience trying to access Carmel Point Beach? Weller asked. The young woman nodded. I've lived in Carmel my whole life, but I've never been able to go to that beach. There's no public path, and the private landowners around it, including Mr. Eastwood, have signs warning people to keep out. So you, a local resident, have been denied access to a public beach? Weller asked, his voice full of concern. Yes, she said. It's not fair that only rich people who own land there can enjoy it. When it was Chen's turn to question her, he was gentle. Ms. Martinez, are you aware that the signs you mentioned are there to protect endangered wildlife, not to keep people away? She looked uncertain. No, they just say, no trespassing. And are you aware that there is a public access point to the same beach just half a mile down the coast? She looked down. I didn't know that. After Sarah Martinez, Weller called 3 more witnesses who gave similar testimony. Each talked about feeling excluded from beautiful natural areas because of wealthy landowners. They didn't mention the environmental concerns at all. Chen did his best to counter their testimony, but the emotional impact was strong. By late afternoon, the mood in the courtroom had shifted again. Now Pacific Coast Development seemed to be fighting for the common people against the elite. As the day's session ended, Eastwood looked worried. Outside the courtroom, reporters shouted questions. Mr. Eastwood, why do you want to keep people off the public beach? Is this about protecting your privacy? Do you think your wealth gives you special rights? Chen guided Eastwood through the crowd without answering. When they reached Eastwood's car, Chen said, Don't worry about those witnesses. Their stories were emotional but light on facts. Tomorrow is our big day. You'll have your chance to tell your side. Eastwood nodded, but he didn't seem convinced. They're making it about rich versus poor, public versus private. That's not what this case is about at all. I know, Chen said, and tomorrow you'll make that clear to everyone. That night, Eastwood sat at his desk at home. Spread out before him were maps, photographs, and documents, all related to the coastal land. He had been collecting these materials for years, always believing they might be needed someday. One photograph showed the beach as it had looked 50 years ago when he first moved to Carmel. Another showed the same beach today, still unspoiled and beautiful. Would it stay that way? Or would concrete paths, trash cans, and parking lots change it forever? Eastwood picked up a worn leather folder. Inside was a plan he had been working on for months but hadn't shown to anyone, not even Chen. It was his own proposal for how to provide public access to the beach while still protecting the natural environment. The plan had taken him hundreds of hours to develop. He had consulted with scientists, studied maps, and walked the land himself, looking for a solution that would work for everyone. Tomorrow he would present this plan to the court. Eastwood put the folder in his briefcase. He felt tired but calm. Win or lose, he would know he had done everything possible to protect the land he loved. The next morning dawned clear and bright. Eastwood dressed carefully in a simple dark suit. Today would be the most important day of the trial. Today, he would take the stand again, not to defend himself against Weller's accusations, but to offer a new way forward. As he drove to the courthouse, Eastwood rehearsed what he would say. His plan was complicated, and he needed to explain it clearly. He knew some people saw him as just a rich celebrity trying to protect his own interests. Today he would show them who he really was and what he truly cared about. The courtroom was packed when he arrived. Everyone seemed to sense that something important would happen today. Eastwood took his seat beside Chen, his face calm but his eyes alert. On the other side of the courtroom, Weller whispered with his team, occasionally glancing at Eastwood. Judge Martinez entered and called the court to order. "Mr. Chen, you may call your next witness." Chen stood up. "The defense calls Clint Eastwood." A murmur went through the crowd as Eastwood walked to the witness stand. This was what everyone had been waiting for. After being insulted in court, how would the legendary actor respond? Clint Eastwood took the oath again and sat down in the witness chair. The courtroom was so quiet you could hear the clock ticking on the wall. Everyone wanted to hear what he would say. Michael Chen approached Eastwood with respect. "Mr. Eastwood, yesterday we heard from scientists about the environmental importance of the coastal land in question. Today I'd like you to tell the court about your personal connection to this land." Eastwood nodded. When he spoke, his voice was low but clear. "I first saw Carmel in 1951. I was a young actor then, just starting out. I was driving along the coast and I stopped to look at the ocean. I remember thinking it was the most beautiful place I'd ever seen." He paused, looking out at the courtroom. "I promised myself that someday I would live there. And 20 years later I did. I've spent more of my life in Carmel than anywhere else. It's my home." "And the specific area involved in this case?" Chen asked. "I walk there almost every morning," Eastwood said. "I know every path, every plant, every bird nest. I've watched the seasons change there for 50 years. That land is special. Once it's gone, we can't get it back." Chen nodded. "Pacific Coast Development has suggested that your opposition to their project is about protecting your privacy and property value. Is that true?" Eastwood shook his head. "No. My house is over a mile from the proposed development. This isn't about me. It's about protecting something irreplaceable." "Thank you, Mr. Eastwood," Chen said. "Now I understand you have a proposal of your own regarding beach access. Could you tell the court about that?" Eastwood reached for his briefcase and took out the worn leather folder. "Yes, I do." A murmur of surprise went through the courtroom. Even Judge Martinez looked interested. Marcus Weller stood up quickly. "Objection, Your Honor. This is the first we're hearing of any proposal from Mr. Eastwood. This should have been shared during discovery." Judge Martinez looked at Chen. "Counselor?" "Your Honor, this proposal was only finalized last night. My client has been working on it for months, but wanted to make sure it was complete and viable before presenting it. The judge considered this. I'll allow it. But Mr. Weller will have ample opportunity to review and respond to it." Weller sat down, looking unhappy. Eastwood opened his folder and took out a large map. Chen helped him display it on an easel where everyone could see. "This is my land here," Eastwood said, pointing to an area marked in green. "And this is the public beach." He pointed to a blue area. "Pacific Coast wants to build their access path here." He traced a red line that cut through a yellow shaded area. But this yellow area is where the endangered birds nest and where the rare plants grow. Eastwood then traced a different line marked in blue. I'm proposing an alternative path that goes around the sensitive areas. It's a little longer, about a quarter mile more, but it completely avoids disturbing the wildlife. He took out more papers from his folder. I've had environmental scientists review this route. They all agree it would provide public access with minimal impact, and I'm willing to donate this portion of my land, about 15 acres, to make it happen. The courtroom erupted in surprised whispers. Judge Martinez had to bang her gavel. For order. Furthermore, Eastwood continued when it was quiet, I'll pay for the construction of the path myself. It will be made of natural materials that blend with the landscape. No concrete, no asphalt. Chen stepped forward. Your Honor, we have letters from 5 independent environmental organizations supporting Mr. Eastwood's proposal. They all agree it's a better solution than what Pacific Coast has suggested. Judge Martinez looked impressed. Mr. Eastwood, are you saying you're willing to donate 15 acres of your own land and pay for the construction of a public access path? Yes, Your Honor, Eastwood said firmly. I've never been against public access. I've only been against destroying the natural environment to create that access. The judge turned to Weller. Counselor, your cross-examination? Weller looked flustered. This was clearly not what he had expected. He approached Eastwood with less confidence than before. Mr. Eastwood, this is quite a generous offer. But why didn't you propose this solution years ago when this dispute first began? Because the right solution takes time, Eastwood replied. I needed to work with scientists to find a path that truly protected the wildlife. I didn't want to propose something that wouldn't work. Weller tried a different approach. Your proposed path is longer than ours. Don't you think that will discourage people from using it? It's a quarter mile longer, Eastwood said. That's about a 5-minute walk. I think most people would be happy to walk 5 extra minutes if it means preserving the natural beauty they came to see. Weller paced in front of the witness stand. Mr. Eastwood, isn't it true that your proposal would still keep people farther away from your property than our plan would? Eastwood's eyes narrowed slightly. As I said before, my house is over a mile away from either path. This isn't about my privacy. Weller was growing frustrated. He picked up Eastwood's map and studied it. This alternative path goes through a wooded area. Wouldn't building a path there also disturb wildlife? That area has already been surveyed, Eastwood explained patiently. There are no endangered species there. The trees provide natural shelter for the path without needing to be cut down. The environmental impact would be minimal. For the next 30 minutes, Weller tried to find problems with Eastwood's proposal. But Eastwood had answers for every question. It was clear he had thought carefully about every detail. Finally, Weller asked, Mr. Eastwood, if you care so much about the environment, why did you wait until you were sued to offer this solution? Eastwood looked directly at Weller. I didn't wait. I've been working on this plan for over a year. I approached Pacific Coast Development with an early version 6 months ago. They weren't interested in talking. Weller looked surprised. I was never informed of this. I have copies of the emails, Eastwood said calmly. I'll be happy to provide them to the court. Weller had no more questions after that. As Eastwood returned to his seat, he could feel the mood in the courtroom had changed. People were looking at him with new respect. Even some of the Pacific Coast executives seemed impressed by his proposal. Judge Martinez called a recess for lunch. When we return, she said, I'd like to hear from Pacific Coast Development about their response to Mr. Eastwood's proposal. During the lunch break, Eastwood and Chen sat in a small room in the courthouse. Chen was smiling. That went even better than I expected, he said. Your proposal caught them completely off guard. Eastwood nodded. I think we have a chance now. More than a chance, Chen said. Did you see the faces of those Pacific Coast executives? They know your solution is better than theirs, and they know they'll look terrible if they reject a plan that gives the public access while protecting the environment. Outside in the hallway, they could hear reporters talking excitedly about the morning's events. The story was changing. It was no longer about a rich celebrity trying to keep people away from a public beach. Now it was about finding a solution that worked for everyone. When court resumed after lunch, the Pacific Coast legal team looked different. Weller was whispering urgently with the executives. New papers were being passed around their table. Something was happening. Judge Martinez called the court to order. Mr. Weller, does Pacific Coast Development have a response to Mr. Eastwood's proposal? Weller stood up. He looked uncomfortable. Your Honor, my clients would like to request a 24-hour recess to properly consider Mr. Eastwood's proposal. The judge looked at Chen. Any objection from the defense? No objection, Your Honor, Chen said. Very well, Judge Martinez said. Court will resume tomorrow at 9 a.m. As people began to leave the courtroom, one of the Pacific Coast executives approached Eastwood. Mr. Eastwood, would it be possible for us to meet privately to discuss your proposal in more detail? Eastwood looked at Chen, who nodded slightly. Yes, Eastwood said, I'm willing to talk. That afternoon, Eastwood and Chen met with the Pacific Coast team at a conference room in Chen's office. The mood was very different from the hostility of the courtroom. The executives asked detailed questions about Eastwood's plan. They seemed genuinely interested. By evening, something remarkable had happened. Pacific Coast Development agreed to drop their lawsuit and accept Eastwood's alternative path. In return, Eastwood would publicly support the company's future projects that met strict environmental standards. We have a deal, the lead executive said, shaking Eastwood's hand. Your solution is better than ours. We should have listened to you months ago. As Eastwood drove home that night, he felt a deep sense of satisfaction. The legal battle was over and the coastal land would be protected. People would have access to the beach without harming the fragile ecosystem. It was the best possible outcome. Tomorrow they would tell the judge about their agreement. The case would be over. But Eastwood knew the real work was just beginning. Now they had to build the path and create a plan to protect the land forever. He parked his car and walked out to his porch, looking at the distant ocean in the moonlight. The battle had been worth fighting. Some things were worth standing up for, no matter what it cost. The next morning, the courthouse was even more crowded than before. News had spread that something big was about to happen in the Eastwood case. Reporters filled the hallways, and camera crews waited outside. Clint Eastwood arrived early, as usual. He looked calm as he walked through the crowd with Michael Chen at his side. People called out questions, but Eastwood just nodded politely and kept walking. Inside the courtroom, the Pacific Coast Development team was already seated. Marcus Weller looked different today, less aggressive, more thoughtful. The company executives sat behind him, their faces serious but no longer hostile. Judge Martinez entered and called the court to order. I understand the parties have something to share with the court, she said. Weller stood up. Yes, Your Honor. After careful consideration of Mr. Eastwood's proposal, Pacific Coast Development has decided to withdraw our lawsuit. We have reached an agreement with Mr. Eastwood that satisfies all parties. A buzz of excitement filled the courtroom. Judge Martinez raised her eyebrows, looking surprised but pleased. That's good news. Can you share the details of this agreement? Yes. Your Honor, Weller said. Pacific Coast Development will accept Mr. Eastwood's alternative path for public beach access. Mr. Eastwood will donate 15 acres of his land for this purpose and will fund the construction of the path. In return, we will drop all claims against him and work together to ensure the path is built in an environmentally responsible way. The judge turned to Chen. Does the defense confirm this agreement? Chen stood up. We do, Your Honor. Mr. Eastwood is pleased that a solution has been found that protects both public access and environmental conservation. Judge Martinez nodded. This is an excellent resolution. The court appreciates both parties' willingness to find common ground. She looked at Eastwood. Mr. Eastwood, would you like to make a statement before I close this case? Eastwood rose slowly and approached the front of the courtroom. All eyes were on him. The famous actor who had been insulted in this very room now stood tall and dignified. Thank you, Your Honor, he said. I just want to say that this was never about keeping people away from the beach. It was about finding a way for people to enjoy nature without destroying it. The solution we've agreed on will let families visit this beautiful coastline for generations to come, while protecting the wildlife that makes it special. That's all I ever wanted. The judge smiled. Case dismissed. Court is adjourned. As people began to leave the courtroom, there was a feeling of relief and satisfaction. Even those who had initially sided with Pacific Coast Development seemed happy with the outcome. This wasn't a case where one side won and the other lost. It was a solution that worked for everyone. Outside the courthouse, reporters surrounded Eastwood and the Pacific Coast executives. Camera flashes lit up the steps as the former opponents stood side by side. A reporter asked, "Mr. Eastwood, how do you feel about the agreement?" "Good," Eastwood said simply. "It's the right thing for the land and for the people of Carmel." Another reporter turned to Joseph Turner, the CEO of Pacific Coast Development. "Mr. Turner, just days ago your lawyer was suggesting Mr. Eastwood was selfish and out of touch. Now you're accepting his plan. What changed?" Turner looked uncomfortable. "Sometimes in business we get focused on our own goals and forget to listen to other perspectives. Mr. Eastwood's solution is actually better than what we proposed. It provides the beach access we wanted while better protecting the environment. We should have worked with him from the beginning instead of fighting him in court." Weller, standing nearby, looked embarrassed. After the press conference, he approached Eastwood. "Mr. Eastwood, I want to apologize for my comments in court. They were disrespectful and uncalled for." Eastwood looked at the young lawyer for a long moment. Then he extended his hand. "We all say things we regret sometimes. What matters is that we got to the right place in the end." Weller looked relieved as he shook Eastwood's hand. The cameras captured the moment, a simple gesture of forgiveness that seemed to symbolize the spirit of the entire agreement. 6 months later, Eastwood stood on a small wooden platform overlooking Carmel Point Beach. Beside him were the mayor of Carmel, representatives from Pacific Coast Development, and several environmental scientists. A crowd of local residents and reporters gathered below. The mayor stepped forward to cut a ribbon stretched across a beautiful new path. Made of natural wood and stone, the path wound gently through the trees, carefully avoiding the sensitive nesting areas and rare plant habitats. "Today, we celebrate the opening of the Eastwood Coastal Path," the mayor announced. "Thanks to the generosity and vision of Clint Eastwood and the cooperation of Pacific Coast Development, our community now has a way to enjoy this beautiful beach while protecting its natural treasures." Applause filled the air as the ribbon was cut. Eastwood smiled slightly, nodding to the crowd. He had never been one for big ceremonies, but today was special. The long battle had been worth it. After the ceremony, Eastwood walked the path alone. He moved slowly, taking time to notice the details. The wooden railings were smooth and solid. Small signs along the way identified plants and birds that visitors might see. At several points, the path widened into viewing platforms where people could stop and enjoy the scenery. Near the end of the path, just before it reached the beach, Eastwood found something unexpected. A small bronze plaque had been installed on a boulder. It read, "The true measure of a man is not how he protects what is his, but how he preserves what belongs to everyone. With gratitude to Clint Eastwood for his vision and generosity." Eastwood hadn't known about the plaque. It must have been added at the last minute. He stood looking at it for a long time, touched by the gesture. As he continued to the beach, Eastwood saw families already enjoying the sand and waves. Children built castles near the water. Older couples walked hand in hand along the shore. A group of birdwatchers with binoculars pointed excitedly at the nesting sites that were now safely distant from the human activity. Eastwood found a quiet spot to sit and watch the scene. The court case seemed far away now. The insults, the tension, the long hours of preparation, all were behind him. What remained was this: a beautiful place, protected for the future, open to all who wanted to enjoy it. A young woman approached, carrying a small boy on her hip. Eastwood recognized her as Sarah Martinez, the local resident who had testified for Pacific Coast Development. "Mr. Eastwood," she said, looking slightly nervous. "I just wanted to say thank you. This path is wonderful. And my son will grow up knowing these birds and plants because they'll still be here." Eastwood nodded. That's what it was all about. As the sun began to set, casting golden light across the water, Eastwood made his way back along the path. At 95, he knew he might not see how this story ended. The true test would come in 10 years, 20 years, 50 years, when the birds still nested here and the rare flowers still bloomed and people still came to experience the natural beauty of this place, but he had done what he could. Sometimes that was all anyone could do. Fight for what matters, stand firm against those who don't understand, and be ready to offer a better way forward when the moment comes. Back at his home that evening, Eastwood sat on his porch with a cup of tea looking out at the distant ocean. The same view he had enjoyed for 50 years, a view that others would now enjoy too in their own way, without harming what made it special. In Hollywood, people knew him for his tough characters and famous lines. But here in Carmel, his legacy would be different. Here, he would be remembered for a quiet path through the trees, for birds nesting undisturbed, for flowers blooming year after year. Not a bad legacy, he thought. Not bad at all. Eastwood smiled to himself as the last light faded from the sky. In all his years of making movies, he had never written an ending as satisfying as this one. Some battles were worth fighting. Some victories were worth the struggle. And sometimes the most powerful argument was not made with harsh words or legal threats, but with a simple, better idea that no one could deny.